Hello, and welcome to the Squeaky Bum Time Podcast with Mike and Laurent. It is Thursday, June 24th, and in this episode, I'll discuss how Germany and Spain did just enough to make it through to the round of 16. England top Group D in unspectacular fashion. But first, we have a full round of 16 to go through. All of the matchups, all of them have been sorted out already earlier yesterday, and we will be talking about all of them. So we're going to start right there. Our bracket challenge, as we've talked about in the last few episodes, the Squeaky Bum Time Euro 2020 bracket challenge, sponsored by World Soccer Shop, is officially underway. You can log on to runyourpool.com and make your picks right there. We will be giving away $300 to World Soccer Shop, as we've already mentioned a number of times. First place going to get $150. Second place going to come home with $100. And third place, nice little consolation prize, getting $50. I don't know about you guys. I don't know how familiar you are with World Soccer Shop. I'm quite familiar, obviously, but I was poking around on there, picked myself up a few new Spurs pieces of memorabilia and shirts and all that stuff. It's interesting. They are different than Fanatics. They have different merchandise than them. They have, and for my money, better merchandise. And so there's basically, for me, three places where I would go to get Spurs stuff. It would be their official shop, which takes forever to get here from England, and additional shipping. Fanatics, which sucks. And World Soccer Shop, and not in that particular order. So I highly suggest checking them out. They've been great to work with us. So right now there's almost 40 people involved, so you got a pretty good shot. So make sure you follow the link in this episode description on all of our social media. And remember, in order to win those prizes, you have to be a member of the Squeaky Bum Time Facebook group. It is open to join. We'd love to have you. Come on in and join and talk about the football. So with that, we're going to start breaking down some of these matchups. There's just so many of them that are absolutely mind-blowing. We'll get into how we got here and the final group games in Group F and Group E. Some absolutely wild afternoons yesterday. We'll talk about that. Some of the heroes and goats as well from the group stage. And then we'll make our predictions. Well, me, I suppose. I'm flying solo tonight, but that's what we'll kind of make sure we get through over the course of this episode. So let's start with at the tippy top of the round of 16. Now, the way that the groups have sort of shaken themselves out, the bracket is quite top heavy. So I'm looking at it from left to right, top to bottom, however you want to look at it. There's one half of the bracket that is far more treacherous than the other half. And it starts with two of the top four ranked teams, according to FIFA, in the world. The number one seed from Group B, Belgium, facing off against the number 3 seed from Group F, Portugal. Number 1 versus number 4. Ooh. This one is going to be an incredible, incredible game. In fact, it's actually going to be on June 27th. It's going to be the later game in the afternoon that day. But there's so much to pull apart here. Arguably the two most star-studded best 11s in the tournament. And one of them is not going to the quarterfinal. So it's harsh that they'll be matching up against each other this early. But it's just an absolutely incredible matchup for the round of 16. The X factor for me is going to be how healthy are Kevin De Bruyne and Eden Hazard for Belgium. They topped Group B. Russia, Denmark, of course, Denmark going through what they did, and Finland. I'd be hard-pressed to say that Belgium was terribly tested in Group B. As we said numerous times over the last few episodes, there's a few teams like that. But I think that we're going to find out a lot more about both of these teams immediately as soon as a ball is kicked on June 27th. So it's going to be a tight one. I think Romelu Lukaku has been in form he hasn't seen in years. And he's getting service from all over the place. But I worry about Belgium's defense, and I worry about those two main headliners being up to fitness to be able to take on a Portuguese side that has plenty of attacking prowess themselves. Now, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention how Portugal got absolutely boat raced by Germany in the second of their group stage games, and how Germany continuously attacked down the left. it remains to be seen, because they did sort of patch that up in their 2-2 draw with France earlier yesterday to clinch them the third place role. But it's certainly a weak point with Pepe at 38 years old on the left side of defense, even though Ruben Diaz is next to him. There is certainly question marks for Portugal. So I'm not really sure which way this one's going to go. And I'm glad that I'm making my predictions at the end of the show, because I'm going to have to think about that one a little bit. But the crazy thing is, the winner of that game is going to get the winner of Italy and Austria. Now, that one's a little bit easier to pick. I think we all can agree on that. Italy, the group winner in Group A, and Austria, the surprise-ish to some, second place team from Group C, just sneaking it past the Ukraine for the second spot there. Italy, again, sort of untested. I'm not sure how much we've seen of them, but Belgium and Italy are certainly the two runaway favorites going into the knockout stages. And so there you have it. It's very possible, if not likely, that they'll be facing each other in the quarterfinal. This was something that before the tournament, the groups could have certainly gone a number of different directions. That's something that if you told me that Belgium and Italy were facing off in the final, I'd say, yeah, that makes 100% sense. So one of them for sure will not make the semifinal, which is really, really harsh. And that's sort of the way that these tournaments sort of go sometimes, right? As much as we've talked about the ability for third place games or qualifications, I should say, being a boon to the tournament excitement and the craziness and the chaos, well, this is sort of the price you pay for chaos sometimes. You get some really, really great matchups too early. With not that there's not enough on the line, but gosh, it makes you wish that there was a trophy for the winner. So it's a tight draw, and it doesn't get any easier. You've got the winners of Group F, the defending world champions France, facing against a plucky Switzerland team. Now, Switzerland is another one of the third place teams out of Group A, and that's, for me, that's a fair draw. Right, because France emerged victorious from the group of death, and it was quite a group of death. And so they get a third place team. That's a fair one. I don't see any problem for France there. Can Switzerland give them problems? Sure. It's a question of if France's class shows up, then this could be a runaway for the French. And I think that the main piece there is that we are seeing an element to them we haven't seen in a long time. Karim Benzema got off the mark yesterday with 2 goals, one from the spot, but one was taken well as well. So Benzema had his first goal involvements that were not called off or offside in years. So since being previously banished because of a sex scandal or exploitation scandal, I suppose. Man, if Laurent was here, you would hear way more than you care to hear about that one. But we'll see. I think France does get through there pretty easily there. So we can go ahead and mark that one down. The last game in the left or top end of the bracket, depending on how you're looking at it, is a second place matchup featuring Spain, the runners-up in Group E, very surprised there, and Croatia, the runners-up in Group D. Croatia seemed to get off to just a slow start. England, first of all, first game is against England in Wembley, and they come out like gangbusters. They don't score in the first few minutes. Phil Foden hits the post, but they just rattled Croatia's cage, and it looked like they had just had trouble getting into the game. England end up getting the win later on, locking it down, and Croatia just slow out of the gates, right? Their second game against Czech Republic, they end up getting a draw. And so you go into the final day facing Scotland, again, in Glasgow. That's not an easy game at all, and they certainly had an interesting game. They end up winning 3-1. The expected goal difference we love talking about on the show. Scotland, according to expected goals, the better team by a half a goal, 1.2 to 0.7, and yet they get bounced 3-1. Granted, it was 2-1 with a late third marker. But Scotland really, really hard done by in this tournament. They go home early with a -4 goal difference and really just the 0-0 draw at Wembley to show for it. You feel for them, especially in this format where a win and a draw would have gotten you into the knockout rounds, most likely. In fact, in many cases, it did. That's just a tough, it's a tough one for them to swallow. But Croatia's got class. They've got arguably one of the best midfields in the tournament, and it's just a question of where the goals will be coming from. Luka Modric, their star man, the Ballon d'Or winner, or the tournament winner, player of the tournament winner in the 2018 World Cup, had an absolutely incredible goal at a time when Croatia needed it. See, but what would happen is a draw does nothing for either Scotland or Croatia. The game is 1-1, roughly the 75th, 80th minute, and Modric, just pure class from outside the box, bullet into the corner, and from there on, you knew that it wasn't so much that Croatia was home, but that Scotland was dusted and they were taken care of. Because at that point they would have needed 2 goals, and it just wasn't happening for them, especially with Che Adams leading the line. It's a question at this moment of whose stars will show up. Now, Spain's a tough draw, but this is not your father's Spain, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about their exploits in their final game in Group E. They won 5-0. I'm not sure if somebody can win a game 5-0 and still still have question marks after the game, right? And we'll talk about that in a little bit while. But my heart says Croatia here. I don't trust Spain. Like I said, I did pick them to win Group D. I expected England to be a little bit more Englandy, but we'll see. That's one I gotta let marinate. But first reaction says Croatia, and so we'll see what happens there. You go to the other side of the bracket, and it's a tale of the blue and the yellow. We've got the group winners from Group E, the Swedes. Sweden with a really interesting tournament. They finished 2-1 with only a +2 goal difference, with a 3-2 thrilling game against Poland yesterday to clinch the group. It was one of those where both games were going on simultaneously. Spain got out of sight relatively early in the second half. Sweden thought they were, and Poland drew it back, and then just the late winner at the end from Klaassen. But yeah, we'll talk more about that in a little bit. I gotta think that Sweden's interesting because I think that Ukraine might have better individual players, Yarmolenko and Zinchenko specifically. But I think that, a man to a man, I think Sweden is a much stronger side than the Ukraine. So I'll take Sweden here. But I think that Ukraine could poke an upset. But I don't know that I trust them to do so. So give me Trey Connor to take that one. And then you get to probably, and I know we said, Belgium and Portugal is a great game, and it is. But in the last day of the round of 16, June 29th, clear your schedules. At Wembley Stadium, England hosting Germany. England, the group winners in Group D, as I mentioned, and Germany hanging on by a thread later yesterday against Hungary to secure what ended up being the second spot in Group F. Oh, how much time you got for all the history, all of the war references, there were 10 German bombers in the air at Wembley Stadium. So many questions here. First and foremost, will the real Germany please stand up? We're not really sure what we're going to get from them. There's just a lot of questions that we still have about, how they can perform in a big moment. With that said, they did survive. And now, Hungary was supposed to be the team that everybody beat up on in that group. But they played 3 games at home. And they had the advantage of a full crowd. Like very few teams in this tournament did. I think Denmark probably being the only other one with no real COVID restrictions anymore and a full house. And that mattered. You got to think, like, a lot of these players have not played in front of fans in 18 months. And when you get in front of 10%, 25%, 50% capacity, yeah, it's great. And it's good to, have them and you can hear them and all that stuff. One of the things I was actually thinking about earlier, I was actually watching baseball and I saw a player react. And I remarked that I couldn't hear him react because that's become the new norm, right? You had a player who would say something good or bad on the field, react, yell in happiness, slam his glove or scream or whatever. And you would hear that because they were amongst one of the only 200 people in the stadium, right? There were no fans there. Now it was almost like, and I always would think back to famous events, famous sports events, and I would never hear the players' like tone or voice when they would exclaim, good or bad, in a key moment because it was just merely drowned out by 50,000 people, in the crowd. That's the feeling that these players immediately had to walk into again. Now, the Denmark situation is a completely different ballgame, and all of the Eriksson extracurricular feeling and emotion that went into that, totally different. And the results that followed for Denmark, I would actually say had quite a bit to do with that. But Hungary is not a team that strikes fear into the hearts of anyone, right? Especially France, Germany, and Portugal. And yet, here they are, right? They're entering halftime of the final game of the group stage, and they were qualifying. They were beating Germany today, and they were sitting on 4 points with, what was that? A -2 goal difference, but that gets them through. They would, at halftime of the games, they were getting through. So it's a tough break for them, but they go out with 2 draws and a -3 goal difference, 2 points overall, and their heads held high. I don't think that there's a player on that team that can't say that everything was left out there and that they did literally everything they could have with the advantage of their fans at their back against 3 of the absolute classiest nations in the world for football. So full marks to them, full marks to the fans. You missed that. I'm not sure how much, you can quantify that, but it certainly made a difference. And then you go to England. Unspectacular. Not a sexy way to do it. But they win a group, containing Croatia, who they were famously ousted by in the 2018 World Cup semifinal. The Czechs, who were the plucky ones in the group. We'll talk about them again in the next matchup. And the Scots, who's an age-old rivalry, one of the best rivalries in world football. So not an easy group for them to navigate. They do it with 2 wins and a draw. And they haven't gotten good performances out of, I'd say, anyone with the forward attacking mind, right? So Calvin Phillips was the star of the first game. But all everybody wanted to talk about through 2 was how Harry Kane was irrelevant and absent. He had 19 touches against Scotland. Whether he got any service or not, it's just you need your striker to be involved. I will always be the one defending that man, but at the same time, So you did see in the third game against the Czechs, he did drop deeper a little bit. He was involved in some of the link-up play. Jack Grealish started, and he made an immediate difference. He crossed a ball into Sterling, which was just a tap-in header in the 11th minute, but he was everywhere. And so the question becomes, what will Gareth Southgate do against the Germans? Is he going to try and outsmart himself, or outsmart the Germans and outsmart himself in the process? Will Phil Foden draw back in? Will Mason Mount draw back in? I think that's actually the biggest question. Mason Mount, and this is an interesting sidebar. Billy Gilmore, Mason Mount, and Ben Chilwell, all teammates at Chelsea, after the England-Scotland game, they were a little too close quarters for everybody's liking. I don't know exactly, but I believe Billy Gilmore was tested positive or had symptoms of COVID. And so he went back to the Scotland team The Scotland team did not have to self-isolate. They did not have to sit out any games. They were eligible to play. And yet, Mason Mount and Ben Chilwell were deemed ineligible for the third game in the group stage against the Czech Republic. Yeah, your guess is as good as mine with that one. I have no idea how you can govern that, how you can justify it. It certainly sounds a whole hell of a lot like they're making it up as they go along. I'm not a doctor. I'm just calling it like I see it. But yeah, that's a hard one to get past for me. So you've got a hole in the midfield. And so, like I said, Grealish comes in, he fills that spot, and I'm hopeful, not because I'm rooting for England, but because I'm rooting for good football. I'm hopeful that Jack Grealish plays a bigger part in the rest of England's story in the Euros this year, I should say. He's phenomenal. And to first of all, my thinking is to play Mount in the central role ahead of him feels foolish. If Laurent were here, he would tell you, even though Sterling has had 2 goals for England and a post hit, he's actually probably been their bright spot going forward. On paper, given the form he was in towards the end of the season, you probably want to put Mount in that spot, but I'm not so sure about putting him in central in that 10 role, especially expecting to have that link up play with Kane. I don't see that being the best use of their resources. You've also got Rashford. You've also got Jadon Sancho chomping at the bit on the bench, trying to get in a game. And I'm really not sure where Phil Foden factors back in. You had Bukayo Saka come off the right in this game. He was a bright spot. I think that's clearly Foden's spot to lose. But Saka certainly gives you something to think about, and another option off the bench potentially. So the weird thing about looking at the rest of this side of the bracket is the winner of this game will be certainly the favorite to make the final, regardless of whether it's Germany or England. And it's weird. It's weird that you can say that after one game, but that's sort of the bracket that we're looking at here. Like I mentioned, it's so top heavy on the other side that Sweden or Ukraine is going to be their immediate opponent in the quarters. Do they strike fear into the heart of England or Germany? No. With that said, 5 years ago, did Iceland strike fear in the heart of England? They didn't until, one of the biggest shocks in this tournament's history. So it's certainly an anything can happen one game scenario. But you've got to think, right? If Class shows up, then Class will win out on the day. So I'm going to take England. I'm going to take England on this one. And then I'm going to take them to beat Sweden as well. So I think that they get to the semis in that, I guess, quadrant of the bracket. And so we go to the next game. The group winners in Group C, the Netherlands. One of the biggest question marks coming into this tournament, Laurent and I both picked them to win Group C, mostly because Austria, Ukraine, and North Macedonia didn't pose much of a threat to them, but then it did their actual goal-scoring prowess. But they passed with flying colors. So 3-0, a goal difference of 6, never really in doubt. Gini Wijnaldum, one of the players of the tournament so far, believe he's got the most goals, him and Lukaku. Yeah, it's interesting, right? It's one of these teams, again, the brand names, the superpowers that got through unscathed and untested. However, their matchup is an interesting one. They'll be facing off with the third place team from Group D, the Czech Republic, who I'm obsessed with, right? You've effectively got Slava Prague and West Ham, led by my boy Thomas Souček. If you listen to the show, you know I'm crazy about him. It's weird that I like a West Ham player that much, but I do. I enjoy how he's been a disruptor for them and for the Czechs as well. And I love their camaraderie. They're a very close-knit team, and they won't be afraid, right? They spent their entire seasons upsetting teams, coming back from 3-0 down in Tottenham Stadium. Slavia Prague knocked off Roma, I believe, in the Europa League, and Souček was FaceTiming them when they were on the field celebrating. That, like I said, super tight group. They've got the juice. They've got the belief. I like them to finish second in Group D. They squeaked in on a third place technicality or whatever. But no, I mean, they're one of these teams that had, a 1-1-1 group. They beat the Scots on the famous Schick, the Schick brace, but the Schick goal from midfield that you've all heard about by now. They played England tough, right? They got a draw out of them, and they lost to Croatia. So I think that they're as good of an upset team as anybody, and I'm certainly going to take them over the Netherlands. That once I saw the draw, I think that was the first thing I definitely locked in, aside from France, Switzerland. Those are the two ones where I was like, okay, this is going to be my fun one. And then you've got 2016 semifinalists, Wales, the Gareth Bale team, against the runner-up from Group A against the runner-up from Group B, Denmark. The story of the tournament, we've chronicled them quite a bit so far. Just an unbelievable story. Laurent mentioned it on our last episode, but Højbjerg is playing sort of a box-to-box role for Denmark now. I don't know how much of that is in lieu of Eriksen not being there, but it's certainly something that's interesting. Watching him all year as a Tottenham supporter, having him in that 6 role, sort of in front of the back line, as the, I guess, would you say, first line of defense. He's getting forward. He's making passes. As I mentioned, he's had 3 assists in this tournament. He had 4 all season for Spurs. So he's the link between, Damsgaard and the rest of the group up front, Poulsen. And so I'm interested to see how that goes. Now, that game is going to be the first game, and it's going to be in Amsterdam. So you take the Danes out of Copenhagen now, and that's something that I mentioned with regard to not just the Hungarians, but as well as Denmark, that they had that national pride, that full stadium on their side. Without that, I'm actually thinking that is the difference in this game. So we're going to go with Wales. So I see Wales and the Czech Republic matching up in the quarters. And so listen, we want to take care of paying our bills here and do a little live read, courtesy of the Chop Sports Podcast Network. And speaking of saving money on our bills, our friend Joe at attitudeofgratitudeconsulting.com has a very unique way to save you plenty of cash on your monthly bills. Please visit www.attitudeofgratitudeconsulting.com for more info. Once again, www.attitudeofgratitudeconsulting.com. And we love snacking here at the Squeaky Bum Time Podcast. And man, we just received our shipment of some of the brand new seasonings at Sunflower Meadow Seasonings that they sent us over. They even have a brand new cheddar beer dip exclusively made for the Chop Sports Network. It is delicious. You got to try it. And mention Chop Sports when you talk to Jess. Save some money on some of that stuff. Visit sunflowermeadowseasonings.com for their entire lineup of products. So we kind of went through each of the round of 16 matchups. But we didn't really talk about how we got here. So let's do a little bit more of that, right? The final day of the group stages themselves saw groups E and F both finish up 2 games apiece. Both played simultaneously. The matinee affair was while Sweden played Poland, Spain played Slovakia, and then the main event, if you will, given the names on the card, France squared off with Portugal, and what you thought would be less important, Germany played Hungary, and it turned out to be anything but. So let's start back with Sweden and Poland. Goals coming thick and fast, right? So Sweden starts the second minute. They get things going. Lewandowski, who is by far the best individual player in the tournament, best striker in the world, not named Harry Kane. If Laurent were here, he would yell at me for that. But he's not. So Lewandowski misses 2 headers off the crossbar that you're blown away that this player has missed these. Sweden get another, and it sort of looks like they're home and hosed. Now, simultaneously, on the other field there, Spain and Slovakia, things are going crazy as well. Spain get an early penalty opportunity. Alvaro Morata steps up. He has been maligned as much as any player in the tournament. And Martin Dubravka of Newcastle fame, more or less kept them afloat 2 years ago. Makes a great save. He comes off his line a little bit early, but you know what? That is a ridiculous rule that should never, ever have a penalty retaken. Anyway, nonetheless, but lest I go on a VAR rant like Laurent would, I was surprised that he missed that, but I was also surprised that I was surprised, right? This is Morata. He's missed chance after chance after chance. And so you go, okay, well, Spain are not on good ground here. They started the day with 2 points. They needed a win. They needed a win to be able to punch their ticket. A draw would not likely have done it for them. And their quality showed through, right? But it was that man Dubravka who, with one of the worst own goals, you feel for him, that you'll ever see. So it's a header. It looks like it's a ball that's going to basically be played, will hit the crossbar and could go anywhere at that point. So the traditional thing that the keeper will do is punch it over the crossbar, out for a corner, no harm, no foul. Live to see another day. Well, Dubravka biffs it, and it more or less ricochets off of like his, I guess, inner palm and down under the bar into his own net. Spain wheel away and celebrate, and it's 1-0. And you just, like I said, your heart goes out to the guy. He just made this great penalty save. Nobody's going to talk about that ever again, aside from this show. And it's his horrible day was not over. At just before halftime, he goes up to grab a ball, and he misses it. It goes off of Laporte and into the net, and Spain lead 2-0 at half. And at that point, they're done. They're taken care of. They end up taking it a little bit to them. They end up winning, as I mentioned earlier in the show, 5-0. Morata was subbed off for Ferran Torres, the winger from Manchester City. Morata did not factor in any of the 5 goals. In fact, the minute he was subbed off, Ferran Torres came on and scored the 3rd goal that really put the game out of reach. So the question you have for Spain going forward, which I think I alluded to, is where do they go from here? And can they depend on their goals from elsewhere from Morata, right? This is a little bit different. They sort of tacked on garbage time goals later in the second half for their 4th and 5th. But can they, against a good Croatia opponent, can they be relied on to score goals? The question is really left out there to be seen. They advance with a 5-goal difference, plus 5 goal difference with 6 goals for, but again, 5 of them came on yesterday's game. So it makes you wonder if they'll really be up to snuff. But you feel for Slovakia. So you go back as the 3rd and 4th goals are happening. It's 2-0 Sweden, and all of a sudden that man, Lewandowski, gets off the mark. 1-0. 2-1, excuse me. So he gets one. Sweden's still up 2-1. Now, if they win, they lock in the number 1 seed. If they don't, then they will drop to the 2nd seed, and Spain will have taken the group. Not a huge deal for Sweden, but it is the difference, again, in facing Croatia and Ukraine in the first round. So they certainly want to hold on to the group. They want to make sure they do their due diligence. And then Victor Lindelof of Manchester United does the one thing, if you're playing Poland as a defender and a center back, you can't lose number 9 for Poland. You can't all of a sudden forget to mark Robert Lewandowski because he's going to make you pay. And that's exactly what happens in the 83rd minute. Lewandowski is all of a sudden the ball, a cross comes in and it bounces to his foot and he's by himself 12 yards out. So much so that he had enough time to take the cross down, compose it with 2 touches, look around and realize he's completely by himself and very calmly slot it home. It was an impressive play all around, but really, Lindelof, where are you, man? And so now Poland is back, and so they're pressing. They're on 2 points at the moment, and you go from Sweden saying, hey, if we don't win, okay, fine. But then if Poland gets another one, Sweden goes from 1st place to 3rd place in Group E in a matter of 10 minutes, and Poland was pressing quite a bit. They get close, but nothing really to write home about, and then the break is on the other way, and Claesson finishes it in the 93rd minute to put Sweden back on top and give them the win. So frenetic, crazy 20-25 minutes to end that game. Your heart goes out for Poland. Did all they could, but Sweden prevailed, which ended up being just a tremendous way to start the day. Those two games were pretty crazy. Like I mentioned, the Alvaro Morata miss, which was so on brand for him. You can't even joke about it. But yeah, Sweden with an interesting battle-tested, kind of game there. It makes you wonder if they have the guts to go forward. Alexander Isak, again, was tremendous. Didn't factor into any of the goals. Emil Forsberg had both of those early on, I should say, to give them the lead. But he's creating. He's everywhere. He's a player that can shock you. If they get past Ukraine and they're facing Germany or England, he can be a player that makes a name brand on either of those big teams. He can make them look foolish. And so that's something to look out for as this team progresses through the tournament. And then later in the day, you go to Group F, and if you thought that was crazy, sit down if you're not, because nobody has eyes on Hungary and Germany. Everybody's talking about the rematch of the 2016 Euro final, France and Portugal in Hungary. It was actually cool that both games were in Hungary, and this game was sold out. I mean, of course it would be, but you would think like Germany with a chance, with a win to clinch a berth into the round of 16. It was wild. So the Hungarians, there's a roar in the stadium in the 11th minute. The Hungarians have scored against Germany, and everybody for a second goes, "Wait a minute, that can't really happen, right?" So after Adam Salai puts Hungary up 1-0, we go to the break, and it is 1-0 Hungary. Now, in the other game, it is 1-1 as a function of two penalties, one being slotted home by each side. As I mentioned earlier in the show, Karim Benzema getting off the mark for France in a late first half equalizer. Ronaldo scored the first for the Portuguese. A note on the VAR call. You've got Mbappe, I believe it was, running more or less a slant route. And he, I believe it was Pepe, just gets in his way, knocks him over. And I'm sitting here wondering, in the NFL, you have with pass interference, you have what's called technically like is the ball catchable, right? You can pick up the flag. There's no penalty on the play if the receiver had no opportunity or realistic chance to get to the ball. And that's my immediate thought when I watch this play again, because Mbappe is running diagonally. The ball is sailing over his head. There's never really any chance that anybody other than Manuel Neuer is going to get to this first. And all of a sudden, it is a goal-scoring opportunity, and it's in the back of the net, right? So in the continuing versioning and changing of VAR, I sure would love to see something along those lines where, it was a clumsy challenge, but it wasn't even so much. It almost felt like incidental contact as well. And I would have loved to see them pick that one up and say, well, hold on a second. Yeah, they ran into each other. He was never going to get to that ball, right? And so it's interesting that that's sort of the thing that gives France a lifeline after kind of a questionable start to the game. So they go into halftime, and they're all square, but Hungary's up 1-0, and Hungary's currently second in the group at half, and everybody's sitting there like, are you going to let this happen, Germany? Well, the answer was no, sort of. In the second half, you have now I had to catch up on the highlights of this because I was watching France and Portugal, but you have a 3-minute span where Kai Havertz ties it, and then Andreas Schäfer puts Hungary back ahead 2-1. It's actually Kai Havertz's last kick of the game, because he is subbed out for Werner, is Germany's going for the win. And in doing so, Andreas Schäfer basically takes the next kickoff and goes all the way down the field. Hungary gives it right back. And so from then on, it is just an onslaught, a German onslaught. Chance after chance goes begging. They can't seem to get the equalizer. And then Leon Goretzka finally, on the 84th minute, ties it. It kind of bounces around. Goretzka follows up, takes a slight deflection, and it goes in. Germany get what they need. They hang on. Realistically, a draw got them through regardless. But my goodness, you just, your heart breaks for Hungary. Not the first time ever that Germany has broken Hungary hearts. Meanwhile, in the other game, you've got Benzema again scores right off the jump in a goal that was wrongly ruled off for offside, and then they bring it back. It's one of the first times, given the new legislation for how the linesman should treat offside. Often now you'll see a player goes through, scores, and then the flag is raised. It was raised in that same fashion, but it turns out that Benzema was onside. He played the run off the shoulder perfectly and slotted it home off the post. So I was surprised to see that one come back. I was happy to see it come back. It bastardizes it to an extent, but at least the right call on the field was made. And then later on again, it's that man again. A chintzy penalty, but it's one you sort of have to call. It sucks, but it's fair. Ronaldo goes flying down the left wing. He crosses it in. It hits a hand on the way by. Clear as day. The hand's away from the body. That ball was going to a danger area. That's one that I hate, but you know what? I kind of get. He puts it home past Loris again. And then there's a back and forth, but there's really nothing really to write home about in the last, call it 20 minutes of the game. There was a penalty check. Bruno Fernandes as he came on a substitute, he almost gave one away late, and he had the balls to stand over Kingsley Coman and like glare at him to get up. Bruno Fernandes, the famously ridiculous penalty diver, if you will. He's on the Portuguese diving team as well. So there's not a whole lot there. And then both games, ironically, end up in a 2-2 draw, and we get to where we are. But it's absolutely madness. If you haven't already, go back and watch like the 10-minute condensed highlights of all 4 of the games from Wednesday's action, because they were just absolutely frenetic is the word for all of them. So that's where we're at. Again, if you have not put your entries in, you have until Saturday at 11:30 a.m. Please do so. It's free to join on runyourpool.com. We will link to it in the episode link in this and on our social media. And join the Facebook group. We're excited to see you guys in there. Big thanks again to World Soccer Shop for kicking in some prizes. And we can't wait to see who's going to make Laurent and I look like fools in this thing. So have a great time. Have a great weekend. And enjoy the round of 16 in the Euros this year. We will talk to you again on Monday.